I'll share my screen. Okay, so a quick recap. This week's Shabbos is called Shabbos Hagadol, the Great Shabbos, because of the great miracle that occurred. That on this day, which was in the year that they left Egypt, that day was the 10th of Nisan. It was Shabbos. 4 days before they were going to bring the Pesach sacrifice. That's when on that day God told them, commanded them to take the sheep and tie it to their doorposts and start and have it ready and check it to make sure it's perfect to be able to bring as the Paschal lamb sacrifice. And on that day is when the Egyptians saw what they asked the Jews what they're doing, and they told them that we're going to be bringing this as a sacrifice because soon the God's going to bring a plague and all the firstborn Egyptians are going to die. What happened as a result of that is that the firstborns waged a civil war, and they demanded from Pharaoh and the parents that to let the Jews go, and Pharaoh didn't listen. So they even fought with them to the extent that there was an actual war where they were killing each other, and the firstborns were fighting on behalf of the Jews to let the Jews go. So because of this great miracle, that's why it's called Shabbos Hagadol. Okay, so we have two questions. Number one, why is it a miracle if it didn't help the Jews? Why are we celebrating this? At the end of the day, they didn't win that civil war, and Pharaoh still was in charge. And Pharaoh, even after that, Pharaoh still didn't let the Jews go. They were still stuck in the same predicament as before. So what exactly is the miracle for the Jews over here? Why is it any miracle at all? It's not, well, why is it a great miracle, and why is it a miracle at all? Second of all, why are we? Okay, this is the only time that we switch the way that we set the commemorations. Usually all commemorations in the Torah are set by the day of the month. And here, we don't commemorate this on the 10th of Nisan. We commemorate this on the Shabbos preceding Pesach, based on the day of the week. So even though there's a technical reason for that, because Miriam passed away on that day, on the 10th of Nisan, and then they established that as a fast day, which we don't keep today, but since that was originally established as a fast day, they didn't want to set a commemoration day on this, or even if the commemoration occurred first, they pushed it off. But even though that's a technical reason for that, still from the spiritual perspective, we still didn't understand why is that we're going to switch around and change the day of the commemoration from the day of the month, like every other holiday, to a whole new way of celebrating based on the day of the week, just because of Miriam passed away. Wow, there must be some connection between Miriam's passing away and this and this commemoration, and a reason for why we're going to, for a spiritual reason, why we're pushing it off. So that's the second question. Okay, so we'll continue on in the explanation. I think since it's a short sikha, I think we can go through the longer version over here. So we're holding over here. The explanation of all of the above is as follows. Over the course of generations, many miracles were performed for the Jewish people to save them from their enemies. In the words of the Haggadah that we say during the Seder, in every generation there are those who rise up against us to destroy us, and the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hand. Through these miracles, many enemies of the Jewish people were killed, such as occurred by the miracles of the splitting of the Red Sea, Purim, Hanukkah. There's many miracles that we celebrate, holidays that we celebrate, that God saved us and killed the enemies of the Jews. So this isn't something that only occurred now. This is a miracle that's a common theme by many of our holidays. So that is a miracle in general, that many enemies were killed. Why is this over here called a great miracle? Because, however, the great miracle of Shabbos Hagadol came about by the Egyptian firstborn killing their enemies, the Jewish people's enemies, that is. As scripture records, who struck Egypt with their firstborn, like we said earlier. that when we say with their firstborn, that means that God didn't just strike the firstborn of Egypt. It means that the God struck Egypt using the firstborn. The firstborn of Egypt themselves were the ones that were striking Egypt. This took place during the Egyptian exile, at a time when Pharaoh was so powerful that even when Moshe expressed his burning anger toward Pharaoh, Moshe still showed respect for the crown, and he bowed down to him, even while he was angry at him, even after Pharaoh was denying God and not listening to him and not letting them go. Still, out of respect for royalty, Moshe bowed down whenever he entered Pharaoh's presence. So, and this is even after Moshe was very angry at Pharaoh. So we see how powerful Pharaoh was, and even while Pharaoh was so powerful, the firstborn Egyptians were fighting on behalf of the Jews. Yet Pharaoh and the Egyptians mightily refused to release the Jews. It was at that time that the Egyptian firstborn, which represents the might of Egypt, it wasn't just anybody that was fighting on behalf of the Jews, a few rebels. It was the firstborn of Egypt, the leaders of the households of Egypt, which represents the might of Egypt. They were the ones demanding that the Jews be freed. They demanded this from their fathers and from Pharaoh, and with such force that they waged war against them and slew many of them. This was a great miracle. Other miracles do not compare. So the point of this miracle was not that the Jews were freed. Usually when we celebrate a miracle, the miracle is that the Jews were freed. The Jews were saved. The Jews, right? The enemies were killed, resulted in the Jews being saved. That's what happened by Purim. That's what happened by Hanukkah. Over here, that was not the case. And that's not what we're celebrating, that we were saved. Because that didn't happen yet. That didn't happen until a few days later. What happened over here was that there was a war being waged against Egypt on behalf of the Jews by the might of the Jews themselves, by the might of the Egyptians themselves, by their own very own firstborn. That was the greatness of this miracle. The salvation of the Jewish people from the enemies through the miracles of splitting of the Red Sea, Purim, and similar miracles came about through their enemies either being drowned in the Red Sea, killed, or falling under the control of the Jews, right? We won, God saved us, God made a miracle, and we won, and they were killed. In contrast, the miracle of Egypt being struck by the firstborn was brought about not by God. Obviously, everything is by God, but what tool did God use? And it wasn't that the Jews won a war. Rather, it was by the Egyptian firstborn themselves at the zenith of their power and the power of Egyptian klipa. They fought for release of the Jewish people. This is an example of darkness transformed to light. So this is the greatness of the miracle. The greatness of the miracle is that there was a war being waged against the Egyptians on behalf of the Jews by the Egyptians themselves, by the might of the Egyptians, the firstborn of the Egyptians. This is an example of darkness transformed to light. The darkness of the Egyptians themselves, they were transformed to light and willing to wage a war against Egypt to free the Jews. That is the greatness of this miracle that we don't see by other holidays. Okay. So that explains answers the first question, the greatness of this miracle. And now, to clarify further why this event is referred to as a great miracle. A miracle, what is a miracle? A miracle implies a change of nature. Okay, that's the definition of a miracle. You have God, everything's comes from God. God runs the world in the natural way. That's the regular way that God runs the world. That's the way he decided the world should be run. But every so often, God changes the rules a bit and he makes a miracle. That's the definition of a miracle. So now, when the change involves not only altering the nature of the world's conduct, but altering the natural course of affairs established by Torah, which has a more forceful nature, then the miracle is of even greater magnitude. Okay, so in other words, a force of nature, you can have a force of nature in the world, which is a regular miracle, and then you can have the so-called natural order within Torah, the way Torah establishes certain rules and certain behaviors of conduct. And that is even forceful than a rule of nature. A rule that's in Torah is even more forceful than in nature. It's harder to break, so to speak. Obviously nothing's hard for God. but it has Torah is able to overpower the rules of nature. So if there's a rule within Torah, it's even a more powerful rule. And when that rule is broken by God, that's even greater miracle. So the miracle of having Egyptians struck by their firstborn is such a case. The Torah has established a system in our divine service of extracting and elevating the sparks of holiness. Okay, there's the general thing. It's a general theme, a Kabbalistic theme from the beginning of time. Now our job is to ever since when God created the world, without going into all the deepness of the Kabbalistic explanation too much, but when God created the world, He created a world called Tohu, which was a world of too much light, and it shattered the vessels. Again, this is all part of God's plan, and basically it didn't work. So what happened was all those great godly energies, godly lights came down into this world. In the second world, God created the world of Tikkun, and this is the world that we live in. And within this, we have all these holy sparks that are embedded within everything that we have in this world. And our job is to then go and utilize the physical attributes of the world for God, for godly purposes, thereby elevating these sparks that are embedded inside the world and refining them and elevating them and bringing them back up to God. Okay, that's the general idea. And we do that, but every time we eat a food, a kosher food, and we make a blessing over it, it elevates that food. We use a table to learn by, to serve God by, it elevates that table. We use we use the hide of an animal to make tefillin out of. It elevates the hide of the animal. Our job in this whole world, from a spiritual perspective, is to elevate these sparks. That's what we're doing. When we finish elevating all the sparks that needed to be elevated, then all these sparks and God will be revealed in this world, and that will happen when Mashiach comes. That's, in general, overview of this concept that's explained at length in Chassidus and Kabbalah of elevating the sparks. So now the rule in Torah is that this is our job. But there's two different types of sparks. There's two different places where these sparks occur. They're within the regular physical world, which the regular physical world is not good and not bad. It could be used for good. It could be used for bad. When we use it for good, we then elevate it to the holy world. We elevate the sparks. When we use it for bad, we bring it down into the forces of evil. But then there are sparks that are embedded within evil themselves. And now those we can't elevate. For example, someone cannot go and eat something non-kosher and use that energy to learn Torah and say, I'm going to elevate this non-kosher food now. He's going to take a piece of pig and eat it, and now he's going to be full and full of energy and learn Torah with that energy. That's not going to elevate any sparks within the pig, because anything that's within things that are forbidden by Torah, which are the forces of evil, they cannot be elevated and refined by utilizing them. Instead, the way to do that, it is impossible to refine the three impure klipos by extracting the divine sparks embedded within them. These things must be utterly rejected. Okay, the way we elevate them is doing the opposite, is by rejecting them. We have to destroy them. We have to reject it. By not eating the non-kosher food, that's how we elevate that spark. By not eating it, not by eating it and using it out, but by not eating it, that's how we elevate it. So that's in general, okay? Anything that's in this world that's embedded in something forbidden, we have to reject. We're not able to utilize it and refine and elevate it that way. We have to reject. So going back to our discussion over here. Therefore, the demand of the Egyptian firstborn to release the Jewish people and the war that the Egyptian firstborn waged subsequently against the other Egyptians, although somewhat understandable from a natural perspective, since the firstborn were fearful of their lives, obviously they weren't doing this out of their pure, suddenly they had this great inspiration to switch sides and fight for the Jews because they wanted the Jews to free. They were scared for their lives. So from a natural perspective, it was understandable But from a spiritual perspective, it's a great miracle because this signaled a change in the nature of holiness. Then, in the nature of holiness, the rules of these spiritual dynamics over here is that the Egyptians represent the forces of evil. They don't fight for Jews. They don't fight for holiness. They fight against holiness. That's what they are. They're forces of evil. And this is a rule established within Torah. You have the forces of holiness, you have the forces of unholiness, and the forces of unholiness don't go and fight for the Jews. They don't become suddenly refined and utilized for holiness. That's not what happens. The only way you can help them is to destroy them. That's the general rule. But over here, we have an example where there's a transformation, a change of nature, of the spiritual nature of these forces. You have the Egyptians themselves, the firstborn Egyptians, the might, representing the might of the forces of unholiness, and they're being transformed and fighting for the Jews. This is a greatness of the miracle that we don't find by any other time. All other miracles, it was the holiness that fought against the unholiness and won. That's what happened by Purim. That's what happened by Hanukkah. But here you have the unholiness themselves that's fighting against the unholiness and for the Jews. They're fighting for the side of holiness. Again, we have to look. This whole explanation is from a spiritual perspective. From a natural perspective, it's understandable. They were fighting for they're fighting for their lives. They didn't care about the Jews. But from a spiritual perspective, this was a huge miracle that we don't have by any other holiday. This was a change in the nature of holiness, and thus was a great miracle. So that clarifies even more from a spiritual perspective what was the greatness of this miracle. Okay, so now we answer the first question. Tomorrow we'll go to answer the second question, and then we'll connect it with this week's Torah portion. Okay, we'll end the class over here. I'll unmute everybody and stop